Growing up in the 90s was an absolutely crazy time because unlike today where you have smartphones and the internet at your fingertips, you didn't have that luxury back in the day. So if you were at school or on the playground and a kid told you a crazy rumor, you might think it was actually true. You saw this with movies and music and all sorts of different things. When it comes to music, Marilyn Manson had 2 of his ribs removed to, well, do things. And of course he was the kid from the Wonder Years. When it comes to movies, does it say sex in the clouds on The Lion King? Who knows? But evidently the kid that told you it firmly believed it. So a lot of these things got perpetuated and passed around. Of course, video games were a whole nother subject though, and some of these were perpetuated by video game magazines themselves. Remember EGM with the whole Shenlong incident that made people go absolutely crazy for the supposed hidden character in Street Fighter 2. But I feel like there were a lot of stories that don't get told about things on the playground or things in classrooms where kids told you crazy stuff and you tended to believe it. So in this video, I basically want to talk about some of the stories that I heard growing up, and I definitely want to hear what stories you heard growing up too. So make sure you let me know in the comment section down below if you heard any of these stories or you have some of the crazy stories to tell for yourself. But sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let's take a trip down memory lane and talk about some of the craziest video game lies that were told on the playground.
Hey, RGT85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my God, it's Stevie Richards! So the first game I want to talk about is a game that is very iconic for a lot of people. It was a huge hit in the arcade, and then when it came to home consoles, everyone had to have it. And that, of course, is NBA Jam. Now, NBA Jam actually has 2 different lores that I have heard on the playground. And one of them was actually somewhat rooted in reality, but then sort of amplified times 10. And then one of them, of course, was a complete lie. The one that was rooted in reality was the fact that Mortal Kombat characters were hidden in NBA Jam. Now, of course, early machines of NBA Jam actually did have some Mortal Kombat characters that you could play as. So a lot of people thought that this was going to be in the home console versions as well. Obviously the NBA probably did not like having Scorpion and Sub-Zero in an NBA game because they, pretty much kill people with fatalities. So it kind of made sense that these were removed. But a lot of people felt that in the home versions there was a way to access them. Of course this was amplified by 10 when the kids started saying things like, oh, I heard there's fatalities in NBA Jam. When you get the Mortal Kombat characters, you can straight up do fatalities and kill your favorite NBA players. And it's like, okay, that wouldn't really fly. But it was definitely something that was talked about heavily on the playgrounds. I remember kids talking about it all the time. I remember some of the kids saying that they had access to characters like Scorpion and Sub-Zero on their copy of NBA Jam. Maybe they got a special copy of NBA Jam, but it was obviously absolute BS. But the one that was rooted nowhere near reality was the fact that Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal were hidden in the game. Now, of course, Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal were 2 of the biggest icons of NBA in the 90s, but Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal were not in NBA Jam. They actually weren't in a lot of NBA games at that time, primarily because of what was going on. Shaq, of course, was working on Shaq Fu. So because of that, Shaq's likeness could not be used in NBA games. Michael Jordan had Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City on the Super Nintendo. So once again, Michael Jordan was not able to be accessed in these NBA games. So when you would play things like NBA Live, there would just be a character with the number 99 that would be sufficing as Michael Jordan, and he had all the stats, but you could not say the name Michael Jordan. Of course, Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal were not in NBA Jam, but that was something that I heard all of the time, that there was a secret code to access them, the secret code to put them in the game, but of course that was completely false. The next 2 games have something in common in the fact that both of these games involved nudity. Obviously when you're growing up in the 90s, you're starting to come into your manhood, you're starting to look at girls in bikini magazines, your friend had the Playboy magazines that you go over and check them out at his house. So checking out things like that, exploring yourself as a kid, I mean that's just what kids do. But these 2 games definitely had a lot of rumors about nudity in them, and I'm sure YouTube is just gonna absolutely love this video saying the word nudity, but it must be said, these stories must be told. When Tomb Raider first burst onto the scene, it was unlike anything that a lot of kids had seen at the time. You didn't really see these strong female characters in video games really leading up to that time. Sure, you had Samus and Metroid and things like that, but as far as a highly sexualized chick as a lead character in a video game, you didn't really see that. And of course, the early Tomb Raider games were known for the cylinder block boobs, because really, I mean, that's what they look like. They literally look like big cylinder blocks. So the main rumor that went around with Tomb Raider was, of course, the fact that supposedly there was a way to get Lara Croft off in the buff. And supposedly you could do things like maybe beat the game in a certain amount of time. I remember hearing things about Game Shark codes. That seemed to be something that a lot of the kids talked about on the playgrounds and in the schools that I went to, that there were Game Shark codes to make Laura be in the buff and be naked in these games. But of course, they were without any sort of substantial information. However, this rumor I feel was very, very popular. If you look at the internet, you can actually see people talk about this in the infancy of the internet days as potentially being something real. So it was just crazy to me how people thought that in this game there would be a way to access nudity and have your lead character be a naked woman in this game. But obviously Lara Croft was definitely a sex icon of the 90s when it comes to video games. A lot of kids fantasize about her, like, oh, she's so hot. And I mean, I was playing Tomb Raider on the Sega Saturn, and you know, I thought she was pretty hot too. So I'm not going to give you guys any grief if you thought that. But that was definitely something I heard a lot about. But the other thing is definitely much more specific. Now, of course, when it comes to Mortal Kombat was one of the biggest arcade games, and then it came to home consoles. And because of this, it was very, very violent. And a lot of senators didn't like it. It had all sorts of problems with the government and stuff like that. But I remember this one kid. His name was Louis. I don't remember what grade this was in, but I don't remember too much about Louis either. But I remember 3 specific things about Louis. The first thing about Louis was he looked kind of like Louis Anderson. And not Louis Anderson the adult, but Louis Anderson the kid on Life with Louis. That was such a good show. It's Life with Louis. I don't know why, but the kid looked like Louis Anderson. Second, the kid really liked Butterfingers. I don't know why I remember that, but he really liked Butterfingers. And third, he used to have a really poofy starter jacket that everyone had, but he would turn it like sideways and have it so like the one of the arms was like an elephant trunk, and he would look out of it and he would chase kids down in the schoolyard. Like, he was a weird dude. But Louis told me that there was a way to get Sonya Blade naked, and he had that when it came to Mortal Kombat, and it was called a Nudality. And basically it was a thing where Sonya Blade would get naked, and it would be a special Nudality, and it was really hard to access, but you could do it. He wasn't quite sure how he did it, but he pulled it off one time, and Louis had all the kids on the playground believing him, myself included. So we would go over to Louis's house sometimes after school to try to get Louis to do it, and Louis would be like, oh man, I can't do it today, but I swear I've done it before, And once again, the Nudality thing actually picked up steam. It was something that some kids actually thought was in the game, and that was something that it was talked about on message boards. Of course, there was that Strip Fighter game that I don't know if it ever officially came out, but I know that there was a game called Strip Fighter that some people were assimilating with this Nudality code as well. But the Nudality thing, I think everyone heard this on their playground in some way, shape, or form. But I just remember Louis being the kid to deliver that information. And Louis, I don't know where you are nowadays. I don't know if you still look like Louis Anderson, but if I ever see you again, I got a Butterfinger with your name on it. And the final great story from the video game playground scene has to be, of course, Luigi in Super Mario 64. Now, Super Mario 64 was an absolutely groundbreaking game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's really a genre-defining game. It really brought 3D platforming into the limelight. It's just a fantastic game. It's so good. And of course, you had to collect 120 stars in order to fully complete the game. You could get through the game and get through the Bowser doors and beat Bowser himself, but if you wanted to fully complete the game, you had to get 120 stars. But evidently, Luigi was in this game as well, and there was a way to access Luigi and play as Luigi. Now, most of these rumors emulate from the fact that you could get to the top of the castle somehow by jumping in a specific manner after getting 120 stars, and then Luigi would be waiting for you at the top and allow you to access him. And this was another story that I feel like everyone has heard, and it was a very popular thing. Of course, there was no rhyme or reason to it. Luigi was not in the game. Of course, in Super Mario 64 DS, Luigi was actually added into the game along with other characters like Wario. But yes, I think this is one of the biggest stories of all time that everyone has heard. And I think there's still people today that feel like Luigi could potentially be in the game, and there's a way to potentially access him, at least in some sort of skin. Of course, you could do things with Game Shark to sort of make it look like Luigi, but I think Luigi being in Super Mario 64 is probably the biggest story that everyone has heard in one way, shape, or form, and it was really just very indicative of the 90s. You know, this crazy outlandish rumor, but somehow, some way, there is a way to access Luigi in Super Mario 64. Alright, so those 4 stories are 4 stories that I heard a lot growing up. It was the ones that really sort of stuck with me, and the ones that I always felt in the back of my mind, maybe they are true, maybe there is a way to do these things, but of course there was no way. So in the comments section down below, like I said, I want to hear your stories that you heard on your playgrounds and in your classrooms growing up, because I feel like different kids heard different things, and there was different stories about different games that definitely pertain to whatever area you grew up in. This was definitely something that I heard a lot of, and of course, things like the Mortal Kombat characters did have some sort of credence as being in NBA Jam, but most of these were just absolute rubbish, but everyone believed them. And that's just the times that we were in the 90s, because you didn't have the internet and things like that. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next video. Later.